Yeah, good evening. We are starting with playing the motto of ICI. Please put your hand on your heart while the motto is being played.
य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तदेव शुक्रब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता
Very good evening to all of you. CA Manish Gadia, Chairman WIRC. Our speaker for the day, CA Amit Jain. My co-convener, CA Aditya Kulkarni, and all the attendees. Today's topic is very interesting. It's going to cover digital lending as well as the new account aggregator framework. So digital lending has been around in India for quite some time. We know several fintechs have created products which have simplified access to the credit by creating quick and paperless lending process. So today it's very easy to get credit, while you buy something on e-commerce, you quickly get a credit and convert it into EMI. So this is just one example. Now these companies have used something called India's Tech. It's a unique digital infrastructure which provides this framework for these fintechs to work on and provide these solutions. So India's Tech, it consists of Aadhaar, which enables eKYC, then UPI, and then now the account aggregator, which is going to further extend it. So as I mentioned, the account aggregator is further going to change the way digital lending is happening in India. As I understand, India is going to be the first country in the world to introduce this kind of framework. This will empower citizens to use their own data to get better credit, better healthcare, better education. I mean, the possibilities are limitless, as we would know from our, expert speaker Ruchi. But the biggest and the first use case for account aggregator framework is digital lending and sharing of financial data. Now, as chartered accountants, we deal in financial data, so it's imperative for us to know how this new technology is going to disrupt sharing of financial data. Our two speakers are further, going to dwell upon it and share their knowledge with us. Now, before we begin, I would request Chairman CA Manish Gadia to address us. Manish ji.
Thank you, Tejwani ji. CA Amit Jain, faculty of the day, CA Aditya Kulkarni, coordinator of the program. And it's really indeed a great pleasure for me that every month, on third Thursday of the month, every month, we are coming out with something new, which is going on as far as the technology is concerned in our Tech Age series. And Tejwani ji is helping in this matter to WIRC. It's really great. And today we have come out with a unique topic, and which will be the future, near future. We are going to see this a big boom in this. So Amit Jain is definitely take us through for next 2 hours on this topic. So apart from that, as far as technology is concerned, WIRC has started a course on data analytics with the help of Python and SQL, and it's a 60-hour course. So 3 such batches we have done. And normally the fees for this kind of courses has been charged by different associations, different institutions are starting from 1 lakh rupees or more than that. But WIRC is charging only 9,000 rupees plus GST for the course. And the fourth such course we are soon going to be start. Apart from that, we have also conducting data visualization course with the help of where we are teaching about Tableau and Power BI, which again a 40-hour course, and for that we are charging only 7,000 rupees. So members can, that batch also has been announced, second batch has been announced, first already we have conducted. So members can take the benefit of the same. So I will not take much time because this is an interesting topic and we want to hear and learn something new from the Amit. So thank you very much. Over to you, Tejwani ji.
Thank you, Manish ji. I think some wonderful courses being conducted by WIRC, and those interested must, take advantage of these courses. Now we'll start our first session. Our second speaker is not yet joined. She just messaged she's going to join at 5:45. So the first topic is digital lending, and we have CA Amit Jain who's going to take us through this topic. CA Amit Jain is an associate partner at Pricewaterhouse & Company LLP with an experience of over 15 years. He leads the fintech regulatory practice with industry focus on digital payments, digital lending, neobanks, cross-border remittances, and other fintech segments. Amit also works with industry groups and members on research and representation to policymakers on emerging fintech matters. I think we have a real expert with us now to take us through this topic. So it's over to you. Welcome, and over to you, Amit.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again, WIRC Chairman Manish ji, Dinesh ji, and Aditya for inviting me to this session. It's an interesting topic and very close to my heart because since I've been sort of watching and tracking this space for quite some time, and I hope that I will be able to share some perspective about what this industry is all about, what are the associated regulations surrounding this industry, and at the end maybe speak few words about what that means for a profession like us in terms of what are the areas of opportunity that we can look at in terms of providing our services to this particular sector. So let me start. I hope my screen presentation is visible, right?
Yes, visible.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So let me start with painting a picture of India, the Bharat, what we call, and bring in a narrative about digital inclusion. So today we are about 1.3 billion plus population. A large part of that is still financially excluded, and what that means is, though we have opened a lot of bank accounts under Jan Dhan Jam Trinity, which is called Jan Dhan Mobile Account Yojana scheme, but still a lot of these accounts are inactive or dormant. There is a lot underserved population in the country which is looking for taking credit but still not able to take credit for a variety of reasons, and I'll speak on that. When it comes to digital adoption, we have about 1 billion plus mobile subscribers, 600 million plus internet users, and that number is still increasing day by day, and more so specifically in this current pandemic situations where we all are working from remote, or the transactions what we are doing is entirely digital driven. At least the country has started to understand the importance and the relevance of digital revolution, whether it is for payments or whether it is for doing any commerce transactions on the online platforms. Now, all of these have been supported by the government and the regulators by bringing in the required digital infrastructure. Dinesh ji just spoke about at the start that we have India Stack, and what that India Stack is a lot more infrastructure and the platforms created by government, NPCI, and various other institutions in the country, which is helping to conduct financial transactions in a much more seamless and a faster way. We have Aadhaar enabled identity transactions which can be done, where Aadhaar is being used for completing the KYC processes. We have e-sign, which is being used as a digital way of executing the contracts. We have Aadhaar enabled payment services which are being used in rural part of the sections to move remittances from one corridor to another corridor. And we have UPI, Unified Payment Interface, which is gaining a lot of traction in the recent past and is helping to move payments in a much more real time basis. Now, a lot of these infrastructures are supporting and helping people to get an access to financial transactions, be it for banking, be it for payment, be it for wealth management or insurance products. But one such sector which still needs a lot more kick, if I would say, is the digital lending, and which is what I will speak about, what's generally happening in this sector, and what are the models that have evolved over a period of time, regulatory overview of this particular products and the entities which are part of this ecosystem, and what we can watch out as the next phase or the next trends surrounding this industry. So let me start with talking about evolution of this digital lending in the country. As you could see, historically, the only way to take credit or get avail borrowings in the country is either you have physical assets, which means you have properties or you have land assets, or you have historical records in terms of financial statements or other records based on which you could go and start taking credit from the formal financial ecosystem. And these include players like banks, NBFCs, or cooperative societies. But a large section of the population do not have access to these physical assets or records. Either they are new to credit borrowers, in a way they don't have any historical credit history, or they are the new entrant in terms of either starting their own business or wanting to apply for loans because they need to start buying homes or for any other personal purposes. Now, a lot of these customers which are new to credit have been facing a lot of challenges in availing borrowing for a simple reason that they are not able to support their historical credit history. Even if they have this, that history is not supportive enough to help banks or NBFCs to take credit, because the strict underwriting processes of these formal financial institutions are not supporting to give them a credit at affordable rates. And therefore, these section of population have no choice but to go to money lenders or other family friends, wherever if they have to take a short-term or a medium-term loans, they have been taking credit at a much higher cost rate of interest, and which is overall effectively impacting their cost of buying any assets or starting any new business. Now that is where the opportunity came in. Given this problem statement, a lot of fintech companies have come in to the ecosystem and solving the problem of how one can take credit based on surrogate data, based on digital footprints which these customers have, or based on cash flow which these entities are supporting today. A lot of sort of technology algorithms have been built in basis which fintech companies are supporting to understand the credit behaviors, credit profiles of these customers using both financial and non-financial data, whether it is social media data or data such as how much customers spend during a month, whether it is on paying mobile bills or for utility bill payments. All of these data are being consumed, analyzed, and based on that, a pattern is being predicted by these companies to arrive at a decision whether they can give a credit, and if so, at what rate of interest. On the other side, they are not only solving to give credit to these segment, but also solving the problem of how easy and seamless these credit can be given to the borrowers, and that is where they're spending time on ease of onboarding, registrations, and disbursement and collection processes, so that if end to end this entire credit processes and the products are being offered on a digital means by taking help of or leveraging on a lot of India stack infrastructures and the new age platforms which are getting created. And one of the topic which you're going to hear is account aggregator. So that's another platform which is going to support this. So in summary, a lot of these things have come into the fold over the last few years, and which is now helping to flourish a new segment of the industry, which is digital lending. And they are actually tapping on a large section of these borrowers who are still not being underserved by formal financial institutions such as banks and NBFCs. Another representation of the same point which I just said is, if anyone is above the credit scores of 700 plus, and we generally would be knowing about what scores I have been having. So if anyone is above 700 credit scores and above, you will generally get credit at a much more lower rate of interest. Even if a bank is not able to give you, you still have multiple options, because there will be alternate financial institutions who would be happy to give you credit given your profile as a background. Therefore, this segment, which is like we call when you did a quick study, this segment or the proportion of the market is very well served by multiple financial institutions. There is another segment on the right side, if on the screen, if you see, which are much below the credit scores of 600, and there could be a variety of reasons. Either they don't have historical credit scores, or they have been defaulting for one or two reasons, and therefore that section is generally going to get issues in taking credit. But in between the two, there's a huge segment or the proportion of the market which is currently unaddressed, and that is where this fintech market is using alternative lending models and approaches to serve this market, where they would study their futuristic patterns, behaviorals, and then based on that they will start offering credit, which is much more customized lending products. These interest rates are a representation of how much risky a particular customer is to that fintech lending partner, and that basis that they sort of vary their interest rates and accordingly propose a customized loan product to the customers. So that's another snapshot of how typically these market are getting served, with the varying interest rates and with a very different unique approach of going to this segment. Moving on, getting more deep into this sector, there are multiple operating models that you could see in the overall digital lending ecosystem. There are companies which purely run like a fintech mobile app, and their aim is to give a short-term small ticket size loan on their own. So if there's a need for 5,000 rupee, let's say there's a employee who needs 5,000 rupee on 25th of the month, because he is expecting his next salary to come on 30th of the month. So for the next 5 days only, he needs, let's say, 5,000 rupee to meet its immediate demand. That's where there are companies which understand the quick profile of that customer and immediately offer him or her 5,000 rupee at a particular processing fee or a rate of interest. So this is one segment which exists. There are another platforms or segment which exist where there are marketplaces or P2P lending platforms. P2P lending platform is a platform where if a borrower who is in need of money and an individual on the other side who has surplus funds and is looking for investing in an alternate option, this is the platform where the borrower and the individual investor or the lender can come onto this platform and start getting into a transaction where the individual on the one side can give money to the individual on the other side. And this platform supports this entire process of completing the registration KYC and helping the investor to decide on the credit profile of the borrower, and also helping the incidental processes such as collection and disbursements. So there are a lot of these companies which have come into the ecosystem supporting where there is a demand or where people are looking for alternate investment options by giving credit to the borrowers on the other side. There are a good number of marketplace entities or the platforms whose role is to simply give you details of different borrowings which are available from different financial institutions. So at the back end, they tie up with banks, financial institutions, but at the front end, they help in sourcing those customers and understanding the profile of the customers. That data is then being analyzed and passed on to the banks of NBFCs at the back end to quickly decide and disburse the money. So companies, if you would have heard in the market, like Bank Bajaj, MoneyTap, are the ones which actually qualify as part of this category. There are a good number of companies which actually help to build the credit score of the borrower. So if I'm a new to credit borrower and I don't have any historical records, there are companies which will educate you, make you aware about what things you should do so that you can start building up the score with the credit bureaus and have a good quality score which can then be used by a lot of these companies to start giving credit to you. So companies like Credit Vidya, Credit Watch are some of the examples which help in actually building the credit score or the algorithms for fintech companies. Now, one unique concept, account aggregator, which I will not speak much on that because since we have a detailed topic to be heard from my co-panelist Ruchi. But as a concept, this is a very unique concept first brought to India sort of a market. And this concept is going to democratize the entire financial data usage. What that means is today, if we have to take any credit, we go to different financial institutions wherever we have financial relationships. We go to bank to get our bank statements. We go to broking entities to get our investment, or we go to DPs for getting our investment securities transactional statements. If we have taken insurance policies, then we get those records. Now, a lot of these data are currently residing with multiple financial institutions, and there is no one institution which have a repository of all of that. Being such a fragmented sort of a market with different players holding different financial relationships, this concept have been introduced to help bridge the gap of solving this problem of data movement or data usage. Since this entire data belongs to a customer, the concept is built on the principle that since the owner of this data is a customer, yet the customer decides how this data should be moved from one place to another place. And that is where the account aggregator concept have been introduced to help collect data from financial institution providers, which are like banks, NBFCs, insurance, wealth management companies, to financial information users. And those users either could be NBFCs who need your data for giving credit, or for wealth management purposes where they need to understand that what is a basis the profile, what are the right investment opportunities which a company can offer to their customers. So there are a good number of companies which are coming to start offering this product, and we'll hear more details about this. Now, when it comes to products which are getting offered in the market today, and there are a lot more to this, but a quick snapshot of these products are: one is a plain vanilla products where if anyone needs a short-term loan, which I just spoke about, maybe credit for 5 days, 15 days, 30 days for immediate personal needs. Buy now, pay later is a very interesting and a unique product which is taking a lot more buzz in the market today. This product is built to give a virtual credit card experience. So today we have about only 60 to 70 million credit card holders in the country, and taking a credit card is a prestigious, I would say, since not everyone is able to access or take credit card from the banks, given the way banks underwrite before giving any underwrite the credit risk before giving any credit card. Now this concept have been built using the same credit card as the underlying product construct, where if you are buying any products or services on any online or offline channels, you will instantly be given credit that moment, and you will be asked to pay the outstanding dues over a period of time. So let's say for the first 15 days, I have done shopping on multiple online or offline stores. The summation of all these transactions is the outstanding due which I have to make the payment on the 20th or 25th of the month. This is what the concept is being built over by a lot of these fintech companies, where they will make your entire payment or the purchase experience so seamless with added on credit, so that your transactions goes very smooth without any hassles of one using any payment instruments like credit card, debit card to make the payment, and two, you get an instant credit, which if someone is in need of, they can easily take that. There's another interesting product which is getting built over, and it's going to take a huge sort of traction in the market in the times to come. It's called embedded finance. I was hearing a very interesting example just a few days back. Like a lot of times we are, and also in the current times where we often watch movies or web series on Prime, Netflix, and others. Now, when you're watching any particular web series on any of these channels, and suddenly you get a pop-up that you on that particular video, if there is an actor who is wearing a particular T-shirt and you like that T-shirt, you get a pop-up on the screen that are you interested to buy this T-shirt? And if so, you said yes, I'm interested to buy. You get a second pop-up or the notification. We can give you this T-shirt with an EMI or with maybe a delayed payment after 15 days or 20 days. So you get a notification one for buying that product on the same while you're watching the series. At the same time, you're getting a credit option as well, that you don't have to pay it instantly, and you can pay it maybe 15 days or 1 month down the line. So that's called an omni-channel experience, which is what a lot of these companies are now looking at, where you don't have to come out of the particular transaction, where if you are doing a commerce or any other transactions, and in the same process or the steps involved, you get a notifications to buy the product as well as to take the credit. So this entire experience is being driven in such a manner that there are multiple entities involved at the back end who is giving you the omnichannel experience, that you can continue to enjoy your web series. At the same time, the T-shirt company is able to sell their product. At the same time, the credit company is able to give you the credit, and all of these is happening while an individual is watching the web series. So I was quite fascinated with the way the things are getting evolved over a period of time, and how this intersection or integration is happening between multiple financial and non-financial related transactions to give the better experience to the customers. Now, on the SME, MSME side, there's a lot more need for meeting their unmet credit needs, whether it is for working capital, whether it is for getting their invoices financed, or for capex purposes. And therefore, a lot of these models are getting evolved, which are not using historical data, but using cash flows or the turnover data for assessing how much credit and at what rate of interest can be offered to this MSME or the Kirana stores of the country. Now, there are these unique models which are getting built on, invoice financing being one of them, where generally if any MSME is raising invoice, it has a due date of 30 to 90 days. How can that MSME get finance on day one itself, where if a 100 rupee invoice is getting paid to him at 98 or 99 rupees, he will be happy with that rather than waiting on the 30th or 90th day, because there is a cost of capital involved. So therefore, there are companies who are actually helping in financing or discounting those invoices. Supply chain finance, we all have seen how supply chain is built over and how that has got disrupted in this current pandemic situation as well. But keeping a point around financing over here, if there is a big corporate entity which is providing, or which is rather taking products from several MSMEs across the country, how that entire value chain can be financed and what data you could gather from the main company is a model which is getting built over by taking a lot of data from distributors, retailers across the value chain and providing them finance so that they can meet their own working capital needs. Cash flow based lending, as I said, that if there are companies which are more driven by day-to-day transactions, which gets paid throughout the day or throughout the week, those transactions are being analyzed by these fintech companies and a pattern is being observed, is being understood, which are then being used as a matter of profiling and then giving a credit to these set of MSMEs. Now, a lot of these products are being built over either based on companies individually or based on partnerships that exist between fintech companies, NBFCs, banks, or other support service providers. So therefore, typically you will see the revenue models of a lot of these companies are built over either for charging interest for the money which is getting which is being given to the borrowers, or processing fees or value-added services in any form and shape where you're giving a additional experience or services to the customers. And those revenues are then being shared between the parties or between the partners who are being joining hands together to offer these products. So that's broadly about the industry and what exists in this industry. Let me now come to the topic which is more around how this industry or the products are getting regulated in the current environment. So a lot of these products are getting built over, as I said, that there is a credit underwriting process which is being undertaken by one set of companies. Then there are companies which are helping in sourcing customers, doing KYC digitally of those set of customers, and then helping in collection and disbursement processes. Now, depending on the role and the activity being played by these set of companies, the Reserve Bank of India has articulated or given overarching regulations on what set of activities will be governing these set of products and the set of products and the activities, and which set of activities does not in the current situation requires any license to be obtained from RBI. In a very simple terms, companies which are going to be underwriting or taking credit decisions and recording that in their books would have to take license from RBI under the category called investment credit companies. There are a good number of companies which are purely mobile app-based driven companies for which RBI gives the license under the same category with certain additional requirements which they expect those fintech companies to be subjected to. There is another category called peer-to-peer lending, which I just spoke about. So RBI gives a separate set of licenses for platforms who want to operate a model like this. Even for account aggregator, the concept which have been though introduced long back, but now is taking a lot more attention and the traction in the market. Any platforms wanting to act as account aggregator, given that these set of companies are handling and processing financial data, which is of significant importance, RBI want these companies to be regulated and subjected to a lot more data and prudential regulations. Now, one point always comes as a matter of evaluation, whether if a company is engaged in multiple set of activities and the way these fintech companies are doing partnerships, what are the different trigger points for taking the license? And that is where let me spend a few minutes on that. So there is one company which is only engaged in providing credit from its own books, which means they are taking credit, or which means they are taking credit decisions, and therefore they have no choice but to take this license. As part of their balance sheet, they will have financial assets, which means the advances and the loans which they have given to the customers, and on the P&L side, they will have interest income or processing fees, which are financial income, and therefore that set of balance sheet and the P&L will be subjected to taking this license from RBI. But there are a good number of products in the companies which are not limiting themselves to only this activity. or they will be doing not the lending or credit decisioning activity, but they will be doing rest everything. The reason for that is either they want to limit themselves to providing the experience to the customers in terms of helping them onboard, helping them register, helping them give a quick process for taking the credit. But for some reason, they don't want to take credit decisions on their own, either because they don't want to get regulated, because of capital needs, or because of any other reasons, and therefore they want to get into the partnership with NBFCs. Now, these set of companies which are not taking credit decisions on their own, not recording loans and advances in their books, but at the same time providing most of the services which any typical NBFC would be doing. These set of fintech companies today in the current regulatory framework does not have to take any license from RBI. The reason for that is the way RBI has defined the trigger point for taking a license is that that company needs to satisfy a test. If you are engaged in any financial services activity, and the test is called Principal Business Criteria Test, or a 50/50 test commonly called. What that means is your financial assets of the company should be more than 50% of the total assets, and your financial income of the company should be more than 50% of the total income. It's a and condition, which means both financial assets and financial income tests have to be satisfied, and then only you are eligible to take registration from the RBI. And that is why a lot of these questions do come in, that if companies is either engaged in both financial and non-financial, and if one is not able to identify which is the primary activity, what calls do we have to take for them to go and register to take this license? Similarly, there are a lot of these companies which, though may not be giving credit from their own books, but ultimately, since they have an access to customer and they understand the customer much better than the NBFC, which is providing the credit, they often go and enter into a partnership with NBFCs where they take on the guarantees, or they take on indemnifications, they indemnify the losses, whatever comes in as part of the NPAs or defaults which happens out of the loan which have been serviced through them. So therefore, what happens to those arrangements where there are a lot of these fintech companies are giving first loss default guarantees or guarantees in any other mechanism, and those are not getting passed to the NBFC who are actually taking credit decisions. These set of companies, if we look at the current technical sort of reading of the law, these companies are not required to take license for a simple reason, as I explained, because since they do not record these financial assets in their books, neither they are earning interest income, though at the back end they have a revenue sharing arrangements of taking share of processing fees. But since they are not meeting the prescribed requirement of meeting the PBC test, therefore these companies are not subjected to taking any license from RBI. Moving on, a quick overview of how these licenses typically work. If any fintech company were to take license, there is a requirement to first register that company as a private or a public limited company, have a minimum net own fund, which is a capital requirement of at least 2 crore, get all the documents in place. As part of the due diligence process from RBI, RBI expects that the documents are complete and comprehensive, since any company is getting into a financial services ecosystem, and RBI always wants this entire financial system to be robust and protected from any instability. They expect they do a thorough due diligence on the directors, shareholders, promoters, group entities involved, and if any negative or red flag comes out of the review, then RBI is generally not inclined these days to give any approvals to those set of companies. If there is any foreign ownership involved, then RBI does an additional level of due diligence on the foreign shareholders. In fact, they even write to the regulators of those foreign shareholders if those foreign shareholders are regulated or supervised by any overseas authorities or the regulators. So there is an additional level of due diligence which RBI does if there is any foreign ownership involved. If the product or the model is purely mobile app-based driven, then RBI follows the two-step process where they will first give the in principle followed by a final approval. And since this entire business is data driven, RBI expects that the platform which is getting built over is robust as well as secured. And for that purpose, RBI have been insisting on getting a system audit done for these platforms from security standpoint. And based on the satisfactory report coming out of the audit, RBI then issues the final approvals. So this is what the overall process that gets involved in taking any license from RBI for any fintech focused NBFCs. I missed as part of the application, one also needs to give a detailed business plan in terms of what are the different, who is the target customers, what is the operating model, the geographical presence, since there is no geographical presence unless the fintech company only want to focus on a particular location. Otherwise, generally these fintech companies are a pan-India product service offering, or details around like what kind of interest rates that you want to charge, so details around capital which you want to deploy, your projections. So a lot of these data points goes as part of the business plan, which will be part of the application to be submitted to RBI. Moving on, this is the heart of this regulatory framework slide, which I just want to spend some more time. So if we see any credit life cycle, it starts with origination and then it goes on to onboarding that customer, complete the KYC in the registration process. Then comes the underwriting in terms of taking a decision on whether to give a credit, and if so, for what period and at what rate of interest. And once the credit is sanctioned, then comes disbursement, where you actually disburse the money to the borrowers. And post that comes the ongoing servicing and monitoring of the loan which has been given to the borrowers, followed by collection process. So this is the entire life cycle which gets involved in any credit product. Now, at each stage of these at each stage of this process comes the different set of regulations which one needs to comply with. If we start with origination, RBI has put in place fair practices code, which needs to be put in place and followed in spirit by a lot of these companies, for a simple reason that, and more so specifically in case of digital lending products, that what kind of disclosures you are giving it to the customers, what kind of transparency is being followed while offering that product to the customer. So credit product is generally all about, at the time of taking the credit, the borrower might not be interested or might not want to look into the details of the credit product, which means the rate of interest, if there are any penalties, default clauses, recovery of assets. Possibly the customer or the borrower might not be that much inclined to read and understand those nuances, and therefore he immediately takes the product. But what comes the situation is, after you take the product and there are default stressful situations where at that stage the fintech NBFCs start adopting coercive practices or start charging higher rate of interest or penalty charges, and that becomes a problem issues for the borrower, since he has not paid attention to a lot of these things. Either he was not interested, or the details or disclosures were not that quite evident as part of the origination or registration process, and therefore a lot of these gaps comes in. And that is where RBI has put in place that all these fintech companies, since they're using digital means, they need to adopt a fair practices in both in terms of transparency, in terms of the charges, cost involved, the period for the EMIs have to be paid, as well as disclosures in terms of how a particular defaulting situation will have to be addressed. And if there are defaults, then what comes as a consequences to these set of borrowers. So a lot of these things have to be put in place, and that is where RBI have been putting a lot more emphasis. They have been raising press releases, not notifications, to ensure that these fintech companies, while they are good in terms of innovations, but at the same time to protect the customer interest, these practices are being followed. Is what is being emphasized by RBI. RBI also prescribed outsourcing regulations. Now, as I said, that a lot of these products are being built over on a partnership models where there's an NBFC and there are fintech companies who are supporting the NBFC to give credit. That is where RBI expects that while the NBFC fintech company can leverage on other support service providers, but at the same time they can't absolve themselves from their own responsibility of ensuring the credit, ensuring the customer services are being adhered to. And that is where RBI has articulated that there are certain functions which the NBFC cannot outsource, and that includes taking credit decision, approving the KYC of the customers. Other functions which are more in terms of support functions can be outsourced. And that is where RBI generally expects that when you enter into any contractual agreements or draw down your SOPs or SLAs, ensure that these outsourcing guidelines are being followed as part of the documents as well as in practice. KYC, a lot have changed in sort of doing the KYCs. What we have seen 4-5 years back with the use of Aadhaar, that has enabled a lot more simplicity and easiness brought in to complete the KYC process, whether it is biometric based Aadhaar authentication, fingerprint, or whether it is OTP based or a video based. There are other means of doing KYC, such as centralized KYC systems which are existing in the system today, where if one has already been KYC'd by one company, that customer should not be asked to do KYC another time by any other financial service provider, for a simple reason that the KYC records can then be centralized, and the second service provider can simply retrieve those KYC records from the centralized databases. So that is also a concept which have been introduced to help ease out the KYC processes, and therefore gone are the days where companies still call for your paper-based documents, want you to sign and then give it. Rather, they will use digital means of footprints to try and see how they can use at the back end your KYC records, which are already part of any databases or the processes, and then make KYC process much more simpler. Now, since this fintech ecosystem is all about taking data, using data, disseminating data, there is a lot more emphasis needed to ensure that your data is protected, stored in a much more robust and a secured way. And that is where RBI has been putting in or bringing in a lot of regulations, instructions, notifications to ensure that the financial institutions or the fintech companies which are accessing or storing those data have enough infrastructure or the systems to secure those data. If these data are being transferred, saved with other service providers for whatever purposes, those APIs and the other sort of channels which are getting used for disseminations are being secured. A lot of emphasis is also on the audit which these fintech companies have to undergo, and the reports have to be submitted to RBI from time to time. Also, if there are foreign fintech players who are wanting to set up their shops in India, and if they have centralized systems, softwares, or solutions set up abroad, RBI is insisting that those systems will have to be onshore in India, which means you cannot take India data abroad and then process it or save it. And therefore, the localization is another requirement which RBI has now been insisting for a lot of these financial or have been insisting to a lot of these financial institutions to ensure that these data are secured and stored in India only. There are a lot of these policies which RBI prescribed for credit underwriting processes in terms of what are the things safeguard that they need to put in place as part of documenting as well as part of offering the credit products to the borrowers. Risk management is all about how do you ensure that your operational risk, IT risk, fraud risk are being properly taken care of, since there are a lot of these incidents, events that does come into picture, and how these fintech companies are ensuring that they have a adequate or a robust framework in place, both in terms of policies as well as in terms of processes, so that they are not getting caught up due to the fraudulent activities which happens in the market. Once these once the loans are getting disbursed, as we all might be aware that there are a lot of these accounting provisions that triggers in terms of asset classifications as well as the provisioning norms. So if any asset which is getting substandard, doubtful, or becoming bad, then there are provisioning norms that kicks in, and which are similar to what these fintech companies also have to be subjected to. So whatever the typical standard traditional NBFCs are being made to make provisions for 0.25%, 10%, similar set of norms are applicable for fintech companies, where they have to make those provisions if they are a credit underwriting NBFCs. A lot of these reporting are similar to what we see for traditional NBFCs, where these fintech NBFCs also have to report to RBI, credit bureaus, FIUs in case of any anti-money laundering, KYC related incidents. So that's the overall framework in which all of these fintech companies have to be subjected to. Starting from origination to collection, they are governed by a host of regulations, and RBI is having a watch over how these regulations are being observed, either through off-site or on-site monitoring mechanisms they follow. Moving on to my last slide, and that's an interesting slide. Like I spoke about the industry products, I spoke about the current regulatory framework, but what's next? Since there are a lot of these developments which we will see in current time and in near future, which is going to shape this entire digital fintech or digital credit industry to grow from here on. And some of these developments is what I've captured in this slide. Account aggregator, I already spoke about, and we have a detailed session just after this, so I'll not take time on that. There are other initiatives which are being taken by regulators or government, and one being OCEN, Open Credit Enablement Network. It's an initiative which is being thought about and which is under development, where there will be a lot more standardized application programming interfaces, APIs, which will be built over, so that end to end, if any partners or any institutions want to start giving credit, all of these participants can come and join this standard sort of a platform and start providing services to each other. So if there is a kirana store who is wanting to give credit to its set of customers, at the back end they can get connected to this open APIs, standard APIs, who will have at the back end these NBFCs or banks who is ready to give credit. So all of these entire ecosystem will be built over standardized processes, and which is going to help in providing much more easier, faster, and a better way of offering credit to the customers. It is still under development, but once it takes a good shape, there are some use cases which are getting tested, but once it comes to a much more advanced stage, I think this is going to change the entire dynamics of how this credit is being given in the country today. TReDS, or Trade Receivable Exchange Discounting System, it's a platform created for helping a lot of these MSMEs, SMEs to discount their invoices onto this platform. So there are 3 to 4 companies which are already running this platform, where on one side these SMEs can post or list their invoices, and on the other side there are factoring NBFCs or banks who can come in and start discounting these invoices, and the entire process is being supported by TReDS, who are the intermediate platform companies. These platforms are also regulated by RBI through approval and the governing mechanism. RBI has recently set up an innovation hub, again a very encouraging move from the regulator, where this hub is going to help bridge the gap between the innovations and the participants who actually want to come up and solve a lot of these problem statements in the financial services ecosystem, And from the RBI side, they have created the council and the team who can hear and work with them and start creating some sort of a prototypes to help and see what more innovations with the help of regulators can be brought out to address the issues which are existing in the financial services ecosystem. So that's a very encouraging step or the initiative which is being taken, and I'm sure a lot more benefits is going to be seen in the near future. On developments, RBI has regulatory sandbox as a concept introduced a year back. What this concept means is if any company wants to introduce any product, but that product cannot be introduced in the current regulatory conditions or the constraints what we have, you can still come and test your product in a very controlled environment which is being created by RBI. And within this controlled environment, you will be given certain set of relaxations from the current existing regulations. And as an outcome of this testing environment, if you think that if a company believes that, yeah, these conditions could be relaxed, and basis the study done even from at RBI end, RBI believes that, yeah, some of these conditions are up for relaxation, that will help RBI to come up with changes as they deem fit for in the existing set of regulations. And from the company side as well, they will be able to test their products before they bring it to market in a live environment, and before making a lot of investment in terms of capital or other resources. So that's the concept which RBI has introduced. There have been a lot of cohorts which are being planned out. Two cohorts have already one cohort has already been completed. Second cohort is being under process. Another cohort which is to do with MSME lending is has been announced recently by RBI, and there are going to be good number of companies which will be participating in this cohort. RBI at the start of this year has also proposed to change the entire regulatory landscape of the NBFCs, and that's where they've introduced a lot of tier-based, scale-based approach in terms of how they should regulate and supervise these NBFCs. So at one end, we have fintech-based NBFCs, which are small in size, smaller capital in base. On other side, we have a bigger set of NBFCs like Bajaj Finance of the world. Today, the way the regulatory framework exists is there is not much distinction being made when it comes to the policy requirements, whether it is for licensing, capital, or supervision. That is where RBI thought about bringing in that distinction, where they will approach a risk-based approach, where the smaller fintech kind of NBFCs should not be made subjected to a lot more stringent requirements, whereas the Bajaj kind of NBFC should be equally treated at par with banks and subjected to a lot more stringent regulatory overview and the supervision. So that's the framework which RBI has proposed. It is still yet to be finalized. They have invited comments. People have given comments, and we are yet to see in what form and shape the final regulations is going to come out. Public credit registry, a quick 15-second on this. It's again a very sort of good initiative taken, where a lot of these data today we have credit data only being stored with credit bureaus, and those bureaus have limited set of transactional data what is being given by these financial institutions to them. But there's a need for a lot more comprehensive public credit data, which currently resides with a lot of institutions in the country. And that is where RBI is looking at centralizing all of these credit data, whether it is borrowings or any sort of any security being placed with anyone else. So a lot of these data will get centralized and be made part of one registry, and that once set up will be given as an access to a lot of these companies for facilitating in giving credit. So that's another initiative which is under progress. The last but not the least is RBI recently set up a working group on digital lending sector in specifics. Since this entire sector is though unitive, but it is still subjected to a lot more noise, nuisance, since the customer cannot meet in person the companies who is providing the credit. It is entirely digital driven, and there are many recent incidents, events which have been observed in the market where these companies are adopting coercive practices to get their money recovery back, as well as lot of emerging models are coming in terms of what more can be done. So to kind of assess and understand this entire products ecosystem very well, RBI has formed this committee or the group, and this committee has to come back with their recommendations on what should be the forward-looking regulatory framework, both in terms of promoting innovations as well as ensuring that the customers are protected when they are actually taking credit from these fintech lending companies, including how the data should be managed, governed when it is being resided with these fintech companies. So everyone's waiting that what is going to come out as part of the recommendations from this group, and based on that recommendations, how RBI is going to shape the forward-looking regulatory framework for digital fintech companies. So this is what I want to end over here. Thank you so much for listening me. I hope I was able to give a good overview of this entire sector and the regulatory framework associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. A very insightful and very exhaustive, take on digital lending ecosystem that you provided. And you please stay back with us, till the end of the session. And all the attendees, if you have any question for Amit and for our next speaker, please put them on the chat. We'll take up all the questions at the end. Our next speaker, Ms. Ruchi Pai, is with us. Ruchi, can you please switch on your video?
Can you see me now?
Yes, we can see you. We can hear you also. Great.
Hello, Dinesh. Hi, Amit. Nice to meet you.
Yes. So, very excited to see you, and we all are looking forward to your session on account aggregator system. Now, before you begin, I would like to introduce you to the attendees. So, Ruchi has over 17 years of experience in finance domain, including financial technology. She has a varied and rich experience of working in premier domestic and international organizations across business, operations, product, and project management. Currently, she's working with Sahmati. Now, Sahmati is an alliance of account aggregators ecosystem set up as non-profit, non-government and not-for-profit private limited company.
Not for profit, Section 8.
Not for profit, yeah, Section 8. Ruchi is the practice lead at Sahmati for account aggregator adoption. With this small introduction, it's over to you. Ruchi, you can start your.
Sure. Just trying to figure out where do I share my screen from. Just a moment.
Vishaji, can you help Ruchi?
Yeah, I went through it yesterday, so somehow it's okay. Okay, yeah, he has to tell me to show my screen here.
Okay, great.
So can you see my screen now? Is
Yes,
it possible
we can
to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you all see the presentation? Do you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. So of course I cannot see the audiences. Those are the debenefits of being in this virtual world. You can't see the audiences and their reactions. But nonetheless, what you can though properly see is the presentation and the speaker's face. So welcome one and all. Thank you, Dinesh, for giving us the opportunity to to explain what account aggregator system is all about. I believe they are future chartered accountants.
No, Ruchi, they are all chartered accountants. They are all practicing or working in corporations.
Excellent,
yes.
Excellent. So, they are the know-all repository of anything to do with accounts and finance. So this is going to be very, very helpful. So, okay, so I will carry forward and explain to you all what the account aggregator system is all about. This presentation is primarily divided into 3 parts. The very first part explains what the account aggregator system is all about. Where did it come about in the first place? Who are the people who introduced it? what will this framework, which are the regulators in this framework, and what will it do for the country? And then we will move on to part 2 and part 3. Part 2 will be application of the framework across fintech primarily. Basically, we'll cover lending, personal finance, and advisory based on account aggregator. And then the third part is, of course, introduction of Sahamati, my organization, and how is it that we are a part of this entire ecosystem. So let me first give you the big picture. It all started from India Stack. So India Stack, if people familiar with India Stack will understand what I'm talking about. It is basically India Stack is what I in my parlance will say is the digital vision of this country. How that as a country we can get all the citizens together, create identity for the citizens, enable payments for the citizens, and now, of course, enable what do you call as data democratization via the data layers. So India Stack has 3 foundational layers. First is the identity layer, which is already up and live. We link it to Aadhaar. Every resident of this country has a unique identity attached to themselves. Basically, saying who I am, what is it, what is my credibility, or I will not say credibility, but what is my identity in this ecosystem. So we have Aadhaar and eKYC and e-signature that form a part of the identity layer. Then we come to the payments layer, which is, of course, UPI. Then there is Aadhaar Payments Bridge, Aadhaar Enabled Payment Services, etc. UPI, like we already, all of us know what game changer UPI has been. I think I have stopped taking cash in my pocket ever since I can do UPI payments to the smallest vendor, right from the smallest vendor to actually buying even flight tickets and the big paying my credit card bill and so on and so forth. So UPI has been a game changer, especially in COVID times in the last 2 years, almost 2 years. What I'm made to believe is it's seen a 400% growth, cashless transactions. So of course, and that forms a part of the payments layer. And the third layer is the data empowerment layer, which includes the consent artifact, the DigiLocker, and what today we are going to talk about is the account aggregator. So these, these layers, of course, enable expansion of the economy, ease for the customer, and also in terms of businesses, it. The last sentence which mentions is it enables private fintech players to thrive. So that we have seen the number of fintechs that have come into the industry purely on creating products on top of these layers. So let's talk now further about the data layer, the data empowerment layer. Now, account aggregator is the front of the data empowerment layer. Account aggregator was created via an interregulatory decision made by RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, and PFRDA. Now, account aggregator, the master directive had come into place by RBI in 2016, and the standards were released by REBIT, which is the Reserve Bank of India Information Technology arm, in 2019. The account aggregator, this entire ecosystem, the players in the ecosystem that are involved in transfer of data, or that is the providers of the data, the consent managers or the account aggregators who transfer the data, and also the users of the data. All of them are regulated entities. They have to be regulated under one of these 4 regulators. Account aggregator per se has been given and now comes under a new class of regulation by RBI, which is called the NBFC AA class, and it has been created in order to manage consent for financial data sharing. So of course, any company that is now will be a part of the account aggregator framework as an account aggregator will be licensed by RBI, licensed and regulated by RBI. Like I mentioned, the technical standards have been provided by Revit, and all the entities in the account aggregator system, like I mentioned, have to be fully regulated by one of these four regulators. So then what is this system? What is account aggregator? In one sentence, if I have to say what account aggregator is, it is movement of data from the provider of the data or the custodian of the data, movement of customer data, okay, from the custodian of the data to the user of the data, basis the consent provided by the customer. So this is a very famous diagram which basically explains in depth what account aggregator framework is all about. Right in the center, you will see this consent manager, which is a link between the user of the financial data and the provider of the financial data. A typical workflow starts from the financial information user. So let me give you an example. For example, a customer goes to a financial information user. Let's look at an NBFC, okay? And a customer walks into an NBFC saying that he wants a small loan, say for about 3 lakhs. And I need a loan, and can you please give me for my business? Okay. So this NBFC, so financial information users on the right side that I mentioned is personal finance management, flow-based credit, wealth management, robo-advisory. So let's pick up the first one. This NBFC says that, okay, I'm ready to give you, loan. Why don't you give me your documents? Now, in today's day and age, the client will probably give documents as PDFs or printouts or share, internet credentials, allow for scraping of data, one of these kind of things. If this FIU, if this NBFC is on the account aggregator framework, he will tell his customer that, you know what, I can get your data in a jiffy if you give me consent to pull it from your bank account. So why don't you provide me your account aggregator handle? Now, if this customer already has a handle, he will provide that handle, or the FIU will give him an option of creating an account aggregator handle. A handle is akin to, say, like how we have a UPI handle, 12345 at UPI, which is a typical Beam handle, or a Google Pay handle will have 12345 at OK HDFC, or one of these handles. Okay, so like that, there will be an account aggregator handle with which the customer either already has it or will create, which will be either his name or number at the rate of AA name. Okay, and this customer, this NBFC will tell the customer that, okay, this is safe. Let's assume it's a digitally evolved NBFC, and says that, okay, this is my app. You will be able to apply for a loan through this app. All you have to do is you have to provide your account aggregator handle. The customer goes, he provides his account aggregator handle. At that time, the NBFC will pass certain parameters to the account aggregator. He will say, okay, I need current account information of this customer from the year for financial year 2019-2020, and this is the consent is valid for this long. The data will be utilized for this long. There are certain known RBI defined parameters that have to be sent by the FIU to the account aggregator. The account aggregator sitting in the center will get these parameters, will say, okay, I will pass it on to the bank, but let me take the consent of the customer. So he will ping the customer will give him a consent. He will store that consent and send the parameters to the customer's bank. So for example, with the account aggregator, the customer has linked his SBI bank. The account aggregator will send this information to SBI. SBI will look at these parameters, will provide encrypted information back to the account aggregator, which will be sent back to the FIU. Now, if you see these arrows over here, it clearly shows how the information or the data flows. This red arrow is showing how the FIU sends the data request to the account aggregator, who will then send it to the FIP, and how the FIP will then send the data back to the account the blue line shows that how encrypted data will flow from the FIP via the account aggregator to the FIU. And the green line, the green dotted arrows will show how the consent is managed by the account aggregator, who is also called as consent manager, how it is stored and how it is collated and stored by him. So, so this information now has reached the FIU. The FIU will use that information, use it to do his underwriting, so on and so forth, and will be able to will be able to decide how much loan can he provide to the customer. So all of this has happened, of course, completely electronically and in a at a much quicker turnaround time with much more efficiency than it is in today's day and age, where it is still happening manually. So, so this is the framework. Let me just run you through who are the people who have already adopted, to the account aggregator framework. Like I said, the standards have come out in 2019, and it is it's over the last like any other ecosystem, it will have take its own time to develop, evolve, get refined, be more customized to every industry type, to every use case type. So, but today we have these ecosystem players who are already a part of using this framework. So right in the center is the customer. Around that, you will see account aggregators who, the blue ones are in operational account aggregators. And then there are some who have got in principle approval and some who are awaiting approval from RBI. Then we have the technology service providers, who are the guys who make the APIs linking all these entities together. We have a number of technology service providers today in the ecosystem. So one is they create APIs, and then they also provide other services, like data analytics, like user experience, various models, underwriting models, so on and so forth. So technology service providers have a lot of various other services, along with providing the middleware of, some of them have only provide middleware, whereas others provide other services. And the last layer is FIUs, FIPs, who are typically banks, NBFCs, and registered investment advisors today. Now, I'm going to run through a little quickly on these slides, because this here is how does account aggregator app look in the real world. So it is just, I'll just run you all through how can a customer who comes on an account aggregator app link his bank accounts, look at his bank balances, link the accounts, and then be able to provide consent for transfer of data. So there are certain journeys. This information, like here, what you see here, AA use case video is also available on Sahamati YouTube channel. We have put out a video of about 7 to 9 minutes, which runs you through real life use cases of expenditure management, assisted lending, and normal small business lending. So I would encourage everybody to go through this video if you are interested to know exactly how account aggregator framework is working in the real world. So that takes care of the what, who, and how of account aggregator. Let's move on to understanding the actual use cases in lending and PFM space. So this is the category of data that is available today in account aggregator through the account aggregator network, which is CASA, TD, and RD, the very first one. So the very first line in this slide mentions that the category of use cases that are being rolled out commensurate with the data availability in account aggregator. Today, what is available is CASA, TD, and RD. And of course, as the players increase, as the ecosystem evolves, we are going to include a lot more data. So the CASA, TD, RD data, of course, is the most important cash flow data, which can be very well utilized to provide credit, to also evaluate to a large extent spending analysis and basically how do you say, portfolio management. So this says that automation in CASA data collection and omni-channel, omni-product loan origination. So today we see use cases, actual use cases in loan origination, in loan monitoring, and of course cash flow data-driven PFM features. As we go along, we will see GSTN and credit card information also being available through the network, which will of course help in cash flow lending, budget advice, spend analysis, alerts, etc. And of course, then we will be soon covering the investment products, which is insurance, pension funds, securities, which will help provide better financial advice and better financial products, customized financial products. So let's get started with lending. So the very first thing we said is loan origination, which is providing credit to the person who deserves to get credit. Today, when I gave you all the example, I said, okay, the customer walks into a particular NBFC and the NBFC says, okay, give me your printouts and your PDFs and your net banking credentials, etc. This is how the left side shows how data providing data from the customers end happens today, and this comes with its own share of problem, which is problems of trust, recency, insufficiency, privacy, eventually leading to a lot of drop-offs. It is, higher TATs, poor efficiency, higher risk, manual processes, etc. A lot of this is taken care of or combated via the digitally enabled account aggregator network, because the data what you get is machine readable, completely API driven, pulled on the consent of the customer, aggregated, encrypted, and it is standards driven, which, like we said, standards have been provided by Revit. So it's a completely standards driven infrastructure, leads to lower turnaround time, better efficiency, better customer experience, higher coverage, more penetration, better risk, so on and so forth. So we covered loan origination. Now in loan monitoring, anybody who comes from this sector will agree with me that loan monitoring per se is a very operationally intensive process today. It is manual, it is difficult to maintain. So it is, especially the slide mentions that, contextually it is very difficult to enhance today's loan monitoring systems, because like what we have witnessed in the COVID months. With digitally enabled account aggregator, continuous loan monitoring will be possible. So it will help give early warning signals to the credit providers, So and because it's completely standards driven, it will basically help in ensuring that there are lesser and lesser pilferages in in completing the loan cycle. So loan business impact with this monitoring and origination is lenders are going to see better portfolio growth of NTB to NTC segments, better turnaround times, customer experience. There will be a shift from manual to digital ways of data collection, data reading, conversion, storage, all of those things, and then definitely there will be a lower cost of rework, or rather negligible cost of rework, because the data will be given directly from the source to the user. So that completes the loan side in terms of with the loan business impact. I would like to definitely touch upon OCEN. In the previous presentation, Amit, in the last slide, mentioned about OCEN. And OCEN and AA work together to enhance or to make lending a lot more easy for the person who has limited access to credit today. So in the center, you'll see a picture whom we wish to call as Mohan, who wishes to get a small loan for his business. But in today's day and age, it would be very difficult for him to get because because probably his bank accounts are not as full. It may not be able to fulfill the requirement today, which a particular lender will need. But with OCEN and OOs, there are various other factors that a lender can, the data which he can get from various other providers will help him decide whether Mohan can get his small business loan that he probably rightfully deserves to get. So it could be via his digital footprints, his GST returns, his home repayment records. He will be probably able to get his small micro loan, which will definitely increase his business growth and definitely then lead to further GST filing, etc. So this circle will only enhance his business and enhance the economy at large. So OCEN, a little bit more on OCEN framework. Sahay is the very first, LSP is short for loan service provider. Sahay is the very first LSP in the OCEN network. It's a reference between Sahay and Bheem has been made in this slide, just like how Bheem is the reference app for UPI, developed, an app of the nation on UPI. Like that, Sahay is also an LSP which is working on the OCEN network for deeper penetration of credit. So that was OCEN, which was related to credit and loans. Now let's move to the second type of use case, which is portfolio management. So today we have CASA information, like I said, and TD and RD, and we already have RIAs on the network. So RIAs, registered investment advisors, will typically use this information to create insights, probably on expenditures, on assets, on liabilities, to provide better financial advice, suggest better financial actions that a customer needs to take. So an RIA today is able to do all this through fragmented information that he or she gets, via, again, PDFs and so on and so forth, various other ways of pulling information. Via AA, they'll get an aggregated view of customers' buy, sell, assets, liabilities, expenditures, so on and so forth. They'll be able to get an aggregated view, and they will be able to provide better advice to the customer. So PFM, you will see the actionable insights can be seen through cash flow information via the CASA TDRD. Budgeting advice can be provided via GST, credit card information. Of course, existing investments of the customer will be, AA network can pull existing investments of the customer and show, exactly what, where has the customer invested already? Is it rightful to the customer's goals and vision that the customer wants to probably achieve over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and do a rightful asset allocation. And like insurance and pension fund, there's also securities that the customer would have already invested into or needs to invest into. So basically, a better advice will be provided via robo advisory services or manual advice, and there will be a more effective advice towards asset allocation that a customer can do, because that an RIA can do, because the data that they are getting is directly from the source. It's complete data and giving a complete overview of where the customer's financial stand is today. So that's about the use case. What we covered in the use case is lending. In lending, we covered loan origination and loan monitoring, and its impact on the loan industry. And also we covered a little bit on OCEN and the entire LSP framework that OCEN provides. And we then covered the second use case, which was PFM, which is personal finance management. So after having known what account aggregator is all about, where did it get started and where is it today, and knowing its actual application in the real world for a customer and for businesses, let's now move towards Sahamati and what is it that I am doing here, telling you what this is all about. So where is it? Where do I come from? I work for Digi Sahamati Foundation. We are an organization, we are basically an industry alliance for the AA ecosystem, like how rightfully Dinesh introduced me. And we are a Section 8 company, not for profit organization. Every minute of our day goes in thinking, how is it that we can make adoption of this ecosystem better, deeper, and wider? So adoption is definitely a very, very important element of our every woken hour of working hour of Sahamati. We talk to organizations, industries, and we speak about use cases. We work together to understand how is it that the framework can be applied to a particular company, a particular industry, and what is it that how is it that we can help, whether it is in terms of understanding the schemas or technical things or non-technical things. How is it that we can help for an organization to get onto the account aggregator framework? We also orchestrate a lot of other parts of the ecosystem, which is we create a fair playground for standard certification, code of conduct, and harmony. Now these 4 bars that you all see at the bottom, which is advocacy, collaboration, common infrastructure, and certification, these are also parts of Sahamati, parts of what we do in Sahamati. We create advocacy, which is what I'm doing right now. It's a kind of advocacy that I'm creating about account aggregators. Masterclasses, hackathons, blogs, all of this is available on our website, what we have already done. We have a lot of collaborations that we work with, tech collaborations, legal, economic model, reciprocity model, of course, dispute resolution. We also have a common infrastructure that we have created for our members. It is central registry, then token service, encryption library, SLAs, spec extensions. And as part of Sahamati ecosystem, our members are also encouraged to have certifications of API standards. We're also working on customer onboarding, security and branding, and data governance for the ecosystem participants. And of course, constantly we think of how is it that we can raise the bar to create more innovation in this ecosystem, so that more and more industries, stroke companies, stroke entities can become a part of it and take benefit of this ecosystem. So when I say Sahamati, so I'm sure you've understood that we are neither account aggregators, we are not FIPs, FIUs, or technology service providers. We are an alliance that works, that is working towards growth of this ecosystem. This is a slide we present every time to make the audiences understand, create a parallel between us and any other existing alliance. So here we have picked up the, of course, most famous alliance, which is the Internet Alliance, Wi-Fi Alliance for Internet. We are very much like what Wi-Fi Alliance is for the technology industry. Our participants will be the banks, will be NBFCs, will be RIAs, AAs, so on and so forth, TSPs, etc. Wi-Fi Alliance, their participants will be the tech companies. You have seen, you can see Apple, Intel, Microsoft, Cisco, all of these tech companies. Our standards, the AA framework standards, are provided by Rebit, like I mentioned in 2019. Wi-Fi, the tech standards are provided by IEEE. So there is a direct parallel between us, the AA ecosystem, and the tech industry. This I will not go through because this is typically shown to people who have already decided to get onto the ecosystem. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. We are very active on LinkedIn, so I would suggest that you all follow our pages. LinkedIn, Twitter. We have a lot of valuable videos on our YouTube channel. Like I said, the use case videos. We have some great chats and panel discussions that we had in our Go Live session on 2nd of October, which is available to view on iSpirit channel. Actually, that is available on iSpirit. But on Sahamati, we have a lot of masterclasses, hackathons, which can be used to get to know more about Account Aggregator. And of course, our website, which is full of information. Anybody needs to know anything. It's full of inundated with information. And these are the credentials of me and my colleagues in Sahamati. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Dinesh, I will stop sharing my screen.
Yes. Thank you, Ruchi. And then we'll wait for some questions, from the audiences.
Sure.
And very fascinating account of account aggregator ecosystem you have given. I remember, 3 years ago, similarly, we had a session on UPI when UPI was about to be launched. And,
Okay.
the audience was just, amazed at how payments are happening just, between two mobile phones. And
Yes,
today, as you rightly
absolutely.
mentioned, I actually bought a copy of Times of India by paying 8 rupees through UPI. So,
Exactly. And the
a billion
penetration that it
transactions in a
has,
month.
yeah. One is the quantity, the volume of transactions, and second is how it has actually, empowered the lowest and the best,
Empowered.
right from top to bottom. How it has empowered everybody is brilliant. It's nothing short of brilliance, I think. So I can't hear
Absolutely.
you.
Mishra ji, share karenge questions? Yeah, one. The questions will be shared, in a moment.
Yeah.
Amit, are you in? So till
Yes,
the
I'm
questions
there.
are being shared, Ruchi, I had just one question about Sahay.
Okay.
So as I understand, the BHIM app was made by NPCI, right? Before the private sector came and then created their own solution. So
Right.
then who has created Sahay, and then, is the comparison correct?
The comparison is definitely correct. It is definitely correct, but more about Oken and Sahay and LSP would be best answered by Credol, Rishi, who is at the herald of Credol. So he'll be the best person to answer that particular question. But yes, definitely the comparison is correct, because which is why it's on the slide for public consumption.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, now question one is why PCR till the implement, however, it has already disclosed September 2007 NPC. I think it goes to Amit, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so PCR as a concept was thought about in 2017, that's right. But then when it comes to implementation, it's going through some sort of time lag. RBI wanted first to shortage the company who can put together this entire infrastructure or the database. And that is where I think they have invited bids. I'm just forgetting the name of the company which got selected for this. It's happening, but not with the pace it should have happened. So it's slightly on the back burner, maybe not in the first priority list, given that there are so many other developments happening in the country already on a lot of front. So yes, so it is under process is what I can say.
Yeah, so I think question number 2 is same as 1, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Revenue-based
number 3
finance
also goes to you or Ruchi.
Revenue-based, any lender who can underwrite cash flow and provide debt funding which is linked to, no, I am not quite sure. Any lender who underwrites cash flow and provide debt funding which is linked to cash flow.
Yeah, so there are companies. Yeah, so there are companies like Neo Growth or Lending Cart and similar like other names in the same industry, which does provide this cash flow based lending. They sort of understand your pattern in terms of the transactions that the Kirana stores or the MSME does, and use that to predict in terms of the future cash flows, and then on sort of come up to a credit amount which can be offered to that particular MSME. So there are companies like Neo Growth, Lending Cart, and many others.
All right. So I think no more questions. Maybe the subject
Maybe
is
one
too
point,
new, so
maybe if
the
Dinesh, you
attendees
allow
are
me.
consuming.
Sorry, one point I just wanted to add. I missed
Sure.
that in my talk. Was what is there for a professional like us as part of this fintech sort of industry? And since this is something that sort of I personally have been working at the firm over years, so I just thought to maybe to kind of talk on that. So basically, apart from our traditional work that we keep doing in terms of accounting, auditing of any companies, and therefore there are these set of new companies, fintech companies, to whom we can take the same offerings in terms of providing accounting services, tax services, consulting services, and auditing services. Few new areas, if someone were to look at, could be helping, since this entire sector or the products and the entities are heavily regulated by the regulators, be it RBI or like SEBI or IDA, depending on the products and the combination of integrate or the integration they want to do with other partners. We could start giving them regulatory advisory or the compliance services in terms of helping putting them this documentation, policies, processes, reporting, as well as I said that since this entire industry is data-driven industry where you keep using data for multiple purposes, whether it is you are sharing, transmitting, using, analyzing, storing. Therefore, there is a requirement. How do you make sure your platforms are secure, robust, and not exposed to a lot of these hackings or exposed to other sort of incident events? So for that purposes, there are requirements. How do you manage your data governance? Put in place the policies, processes. How do you manage your BCP backup? Sort of plans in place. How do you audit these system platforms? So this is an emerging area where a lot of CAs can play a role in by sort of taking the required sort of experience, qualifications, and then sort of start auditing or providing services on the IT front. So this is an area which is quite relevant and going to be much more useful to these set of companies in times to come. So I think these are few areas which I'm sure will be giving a good new avenues of providing services to the fintech ecosystem.
Thanks. Very useful information, Amit, for our chartered accountant audiences. I'll take a question number 5, Ruchi. Can you just answer that?
So how comfortable will Indians be in sharing their entire financial data using this? After all, aggregators are mostly fintechs and not government organizations like UIDAI. I think the biggest comfort comes from the fact that this is a regulated ecosystem, completely regulated by the biggest regulators in this country, which is RBI, SEBI, IRDA, IRDAI, and PFRD, an account aggregator. So today, you and I can't just decide to become an account aggregator. We have to apply for it. And in an application with RBI, we have to become an NBFC AA. There is a new class of licensing that RBI has introduced for account aggregators called NBFCs-AA. So I think the biggest comfort comes from there. We would have the same concerns when UPI came, right? How would I transfer money when I'm not even seeing it? So every digital evolution has its initial teething period. And I think Indians are more comfortable today than they have ever been in the past, about with digital enhancements. I think 10 years ago, if you would have told anybody with about making payments, loan payments on your mobile, or even watching movies on the cell phone, it would have been impossible. But today, that is not true. Today, we are actually much more evolved and much more ready to get innovations into our lives. So I think, and of course, the comfort comes because it is blessed by regulators. Because we know that, our banks are regulated by RBI. So I think the ecosystem is completely regulated. All three participants who are involved in transfer of data are regulated entities, and that is what gives the maximum comfort.
So I think there'll be mechanism of even complaining, and the redressal system would also be in place, right?
would be in place, and definitely it would be in place. And as Sahamati, for the Sahamati members, we have the online dispute resolution that we are coming up with, which we will help for the ecosystem members to settle down with and have a smooth, efficient way of doing business.
Great.
Yes.
I think it was question number 4 for Amit. Yeah. Yes, sorry, Aditya. I'll just cover that and then you can take over. Yeah. So question number 4 was for any neobank licenses have been issued by RBI.
Yeah. So there is no under the current regulatory framework, one don't needs to take any license for neobank. As such, neobank, the way the entire model has been designed, it's a model where the companies work in partnership with banks as a BC, business correspondent, for opening CASA accounts. The companies work with other financial institutions, including account aggregators, to collect and use data. The companies either can take their own license for payment products, which could be prepaid payment instruments like Paytm's, Amazon Pay, or payment aggregators, or investment advisors like Zerodha or Grove for that matter. So today, the way neobank is built in the country, it is a combination of multiple products, and the license is being offered and then being sort of implemented. We still don't have a regulatory framework for digital banking licenses in the country, though in other parts of the Asian countries, Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines, and many others have started to giving digital banking licenses. But India is yet to sort of come up with a new framework. And then when RBI comes up with that framework, then a neobank can go and apply under that umbrella of digital banking, and then start offering neobanking services, which is going to be a combination of banking, investment, insurance, and many other products, whatever they want to offer. So that's the response.
Okay.
Yeah, Aditya.
Yeah, I guess my question is to both of you, Ruchi and Amit. As an LSP, if loan service provider, I guess he is much more powerful than ever with the Sahamati and the data being flown into a single app. Having said that, eventually a product which as a thought of any LSP will eventually have to get approved by any of the bank. Is this statement true? And if yes or no, then how would eventually a product, which, let's take an example, I wish to lend based on certain data point, based on certain credit score to a specific person, and then I need to again have a collection mechanism as well, right? Now, who will lend this is typically either an NBFC or bank to whom I'm going to offer based on all the parameters of acceptance and evaluations. Would this product, which as an LSP wish to get into the market, will need to get approved by any of the bankers, or then an LSP is free to create his own product? Or if we see any pipeline in which this is going to happen in near future?
Would you like to take that, Amit?
Yeah, let me answer in some part of it. So you're right to start to say that LSP is going to be the key sort of participant in the process, because they have a customer access and they know the customer needs. They understand customer much better than anyone else. So they are going to be the key in the process. Now, the way things have evolved over a period of time, in the past, like because of information asymmetry, banks were not able to take calls, NBFCs were not able to take calls because of historical reasons. They don't have credit data and all of that. Now, that is what is going to get supported by this LSP, who can give whatever data using AA in the process and other channels, who can give and sort of give enough data for banks or NBFCs to decide on that this is the right borrower to give credit, and for whatever terms that they want to give the credit. I think that information supply is something which is going to get more and more enriched in the times to come with the use of LSP and many other sort of service providers. And that is going to help the backend institutions to underwrite credit in a much more easier and a faster way. Ruchi, you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much sums up. Now, I think there was one part you asked that will banks, decide the LSPs. I am not very sure of how the network works, like, which is why I said to Dinesh also that that's a completely different thing. Like, I know Saha is an e-government, it's a government marketplace, etc. But exactly how it really works, because how OCEN is going to help in doing this, enabling this framework, is something that is the modalities of that is something that I am still getting knowledge about. But yeah, so but like Amit rightfully said, that LSPs are the closest to the customer. So for a particular bank actually to be linked to an LSP is actually going to help in deeper penetration than what a bank branch, a bank RM can do today. So it will expand the market for a bank much more than what it is today, and much more for the customer as well, because customer will be eligible, so can go through the various offers that a bank, various banks provide basis this information. So it is like doing online shopping, and being able to decide, okay, these are the various loan offers that I have in hand for this particular price, and which one can I go with and which one can I not go with. So yes, but exactly how the modality works, that is what happens after step 1, step 2, step 3, maybe Dinesh, you can arrange for another session. I'm giving you some food.
It's time for some more. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think perfect. Aditya, you can take over now for a vote of thanks.
Absolutely. Yes. I think the space is to watch out for anyways. There is no second thought about it. The way the penetration of UPI has been made in the country, I guess India is the front runner in the way UPI has been implemented, and a lot of other countries are adopting this. I'm sure this is one such space where probably the same process will get adopted across, and the things have been moving much faster than what we see. I guess OCEN and all, we just started following almost year and a half back. I mean, at least, and then we are ready with the platform, and probably we have started using some of these LSPs, and also I think this with the entire adoption, the role of CA, which was traditionally been into the auditing, has moved drastically in terms of the way even we can think of creating models, risk assessments, the entire underwriting models, even the collection models is going to have an entire impact, and it is going to have an entire change in the way banking has been operated. So I think for us, this is probably an eye opener where we have to now start looking. I must thank Amit ji and Ruchi to give us a headlight of where we should look at, what we should study, and then what are the other opportunities where we can contribute as a chartered accountant. I thank you so much for coming to this platform and sharing your knowledge, and also to Dinesh ji for arranging such sessions which help us look beyond our traditional practices. So thank you so much, and also to all the attendees for coming and joining this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Yeah, bye.